Snaggy Pit is unlike anywhere else I've ever fished before. Acquired the ticket last September, but sort of busy at it on Dinton, trying to hunt down one of them 2 linears, and I never actually got time to even take a look at the place. Carried on at Dinton in the spring, and once it sort of closed for spawning, you know, there was only one place I had in my mind. I'm really keen to get down in and sort of check it out. Seen pictures of a few carp, most of them 1 capture, 2 capture, you know, in the lifetime. Proper unique jet black things. Most of the lake really shallow and sort of cut off most banks by a lot of bars, raised areas, but on them it's almost orchards are growing. And of a pit of around 45 acres, I'd say, 50 acres, well over half of it is completely inaccessible unless you're prepared to sort of fish past trees, which is only an option when the weeds are real sort of thick growth. Get the bite straight into the boat. I mean, now it's not an option. But yeah, some truly incredible carp. Obviously the water's, like I say, tap clear. A lot of them long, lean, big healthy black things. And the pictures that we've seen are the ones that have actually been caught. You know, I'm not saying there's loads of uncaught ones, but certainly each season, not seen him, not seen that one. And you're seeing sort of fish from the boat, sort of cream of the crop. You know, there's a couple of deep body commons, to my knowledge, only ever 1 capture of them each. Seen one of them in the spring, definitely say 44, maybe getting towards 45 pound, and got eyes on the other one. I'd not seen it all year, sort of see it the other week, and yeah, it's definitely a 40 pounder, I'd say, you know, low 40s, real sort of distinctive, overslung head. And then there's the cream, sort of like why we're here, one they call the big scaly. You know, incredible old thing, 2 captures in something like 25 years. Obviously a lot of it sort of due to the restrictions of the lake, but yeah, incredible carp, an incredible lake. Heavenly as sort of carp fishing gets, but yeah, you're certainly up against it. Freaks of nature, they know when they're getting fished for, they spend so much time behind the woodwork. But then with a lot of opportunities and with baiting, you know, you can get amongst a few and slowly start ticking the ones off the list, and hopefully one of them big ones comes along. So we've Dinton closed, same time every year, around sort of early May. Absolutely buzzing to get down to the pit to have a good mooch around. It's the first trip. I remember getting down and set up in what I know now as the shallows. Dropped some rods, did all that, and heard a few fish. I actually heard a really big fish show off to my left. Fishing locked up to the trees, you know, it's pinged out the clip 2 o'clock in the morning. Heart in your mouth thinking, Christ, you know, first night on, yeah, tench. Repeated the other odds tench shortly after, so I was up from sort of early hours and listening. As it was light, I've seen a fish sort of, only on its own, good 30 pounder though, come across a real shallow ground and make its way into the corner to my left. With that, I see a couple show in the trees, no brainer, packed up round there, left them to it. As the sort of activity died down, a little look around the boat. You know, there's a few spots, you know, there's big gravel area. With it being sort of early May, you know, the weeds starting to really sort of take hold now. So it's amongst them, a couple of drop baits out of there as sort of quick and as quiet as possible. But always to no avail, all sort of very quiet for the night, you know, you needed to be there the night before. Chance had sort of been and gone. With that, the wind had spun round, and it was one of the sort of, remember, we've had quite a lot of sort of easterlies, northeasterlies, and it was a real warm westerly. The sun was out blazing, and this wind has sort of picked up quite considerably. To the point where I thought, you know, we've got to go for a mooch round. Not in the boat, on foot, wound the rods in, had a lap. And where the wind was sort of right smashing into, little group of pads, stood up on the high bank, a lot of it sort of elevated from the lake. I was probably staring there for sort of 2 or 3 minutes before I've clocked sort of a fish turn. It's just sort of the blackness I've just caught clocked, and as your sort of eyes focus and you're sort of onto that one, another one, you know, in all there was 5 of them in this little corner, obviously pushed through onto this warm wind. So that was it, raced back round, packed up, round there, and as you sort of stood, I remember one coming sort of close, really in front of the swim. It was a little bit like, you know, sort of flick chods, I didn't really want to just flick them out as such, but just sort of, I remember flicking them out in front just for a few hours and sort of assess and see what happened. As it sort of led into the darkness, you know, evening time, I saw a show, then another show, then another show, and they were working their way back to the sort of main set of snags, clearly where they'd pushed from on this new wind. I was quite confident that the fish that were in the area had left. A little bit of a lead around, and a couple of casts with a light led up to the pads, just off to my right, dumped a few kicks of gravel on the braided leads, clip that up, just flicked a little pink pop up with a bag of pellet, a few nuggets in it, 10 baits round the foam, trap set. And on where I'd seen a couple of fish show, I just chucked out a long link with a little bag on it again. A couple of times till I felt it at the bottom. And yeah, fishing. So the alarm was sort of set quite early that morning, you know, 5 o'clock, got up, first light, out in front of the swim watching it. A couple of rods off to the right of the swim, couple in front, so you can never sort of watch both areas at once, you know, you're sort of backing and toing. And with fishing so close in, you know, you're wanting to keep your disturbance down to a minimum, I decided it didn't look like a lot was going to go on, but sit back, jump back in the bag, and yeah, a few hours kip. Around 8 o'clock I'd woken up, on, feet round, kettle on, and yeah, short few beeps on the receiver, sprinted through the gaps of the trees. First of all, looking at them rods, no, dart to the right, and you can see the left of the two sort of up right over, fish on. So picked the rod up, straight away you started walking back. Only fishing up to the edge of the pad, you know, 4 wraps, 4.5 wraps, only sort of 15, 20 yards if that. So we've started walking back, and yeah, obviously you got a little bit of stretch on the strong mono. It's common, sort of like leaps out the middle of the pad, solid, carry on walking back, eventually he's out, off to the left, clear of anything, you know, no other snags to worry about. The only thing in that swim was the pads. And yeah, eventually gets his common beaten, net underneath him, and as you can imagine, as soon as he's got in the net, just relief, absolute buzz. First one, new lake, it's always, you know, highlight. Absolutely pristine, immaculate looking thing. Dorsal up, croaking, angry as hell. If you could build a common, you know, that would be him, absolutely pristine, all sharp features to him. Probably, you know, been caught before, but certainly didn't look like it, didn't act like it either. So yeah, we've sort of that capture. Obviously I was off that morning, all the stuff together, and from chatting to a few of the other lads, they sort of said how neglected that corner of the pond sort of was. You can sort of see it was overlooked, you know, you've got a big point area here, main set of snags, and it kind of, from watching people, this kind of V-line straight to it. With them fish obviously getting into that area, I wanted to try and set something up from the Sunday when I was to return. I'd not actually been out in the boat at this point yet, so quite keen to, all the gear packed up, out in the boat, and I could see the spot I'd actually had the fish from. Just low, so a couple of little stones, and it must have been a real sort of lucky chuck with the lead, because that was all that was on the sort of fringe of the pads. So yeah, not much, you know, only really shallow ground, so a few handfuls of emp on that one. There was a bit of a gravel spot starting, quite sizable, bed chair sort of size, but that was near where I'd seen the other shows as they were sort of leaving back to the main set of snags. So that had it, that spot, you know, I'd had sort of offloaded on there, bucket of pellets, loads of salt, chops, tigers, everything. Good hit of bait on that. And another little spot further along as well. Yeah, as you can imagine, absolutely buzzing to get back. Arrived on the Sunday, really, I can remember it being ridiculous. Still then westerly winds, but you know, 20-mile-an-hour winds pushing right in there. No chance you're going to drop anything with the boat, you know, like taking the rods in the boat. So sort of out, mooching about, it was hard enough just to all ground in the inflatable. Dropped the blocks. I'd got clips the previous week, you know, to all these spots before I went. Chucked all the rods out, checked they were all fishing sweet. All the bait had been, you know, there's nothing there at all. It had been absolutely smashed up, spots had double in size. They'd clearly been in there and nailed it. Yeah, everything was sort of sorted for around sort of 5, 6 o'clock time in the evening. You know, brew, getting everything sorted, and a couple of spare rigs tied up, whatnot. Sort of come evening time, I actually stood in the chesties next to a rod, sort of looking out. You know, rods had been out a couple of hours and caused quite a disturbance as well, I'd imagine. You know, you can hear the waves slapping against the boat, you know, sort of cringing with it, thinking if there's anything in the area, it's gone. You're hoping a few are going to turn up. To my surprise, say just evening, 9 o'clock, up to the top, massive eruption on the surface. Rod's just there, picked it up, right powerhouse of a fish, off to the left. Now I was probably fishing about 40 yards, and some snags at about 60. it knew where it was going straight away, you know, absolutely cringing as it's taking line and you're sort of clamping onto the spool, the things erupt from the surface and you're thinking, Jesus, if I don't stop it, it's going to make it. Like I say, things jumped down the surface, left. You're clear of them, you know. Play them a little bit more normal and caught a glimpse of it, another common. Once that initial sort of surge, you come in sort of quite textbook really, under the net. You can see he was a bit of an older one, dark. Yeah, 31.6 I think he was on the scales. But yeah, again, pristine thing, absolutely mega. I'd recognised it from what I'd seen. I'd definitely seen a few pictures on before on the little Facebook page they've got. So yeah, second trip, as you can imagine, absolutely made up. But to no avail the rest of that trip. Very quiet. I'd actually done one more night in there, nothing happened, didn't see anything, mooched out in the boat, everything untouched. On a mooch round of the boat, I sort of mooched around the end of the pit. It used to be an island, sort of backfilled, it kind of creates like a big peninsula on the lake. Imagine I'm fishing on the right, big boat mission around the other side, and you've got something they call the back channel. 5 wraps to the trees, big thick series of snags out in front of you. So I'm sort of looking in them, caught my first glimpse at one of the big ones. Short donkey common, you know, he just sat there, nestled up amongst the trees. At first I thought I'm looking at a 30 pounder, you know, stood up, he's just here. As I'm sort of holding onto the twig, it's cracked, it's sort of, not spooked, but sort of turned. It's only then I've seen its true width and its sort of depth, you know, you're looking at a low to mid 40 pounder. As you can imagine, moved the gear, it was only a little move there, flicked some rods out in the channel for the night, but again, to no avail. And the next sort of, I think it was 4 or 5 trips sort of took form of that. It was on my next trip. Again, I started in that area where I had them sort of first couple of bites. Putting a bit of bait out there, but my God, the birds weren't half onto it. Gin clear water, a lot of it shallow. Nightmare, you know, you're constantly bloody laser penning them and tufty torching them. Just, as soon as you sat down, chilled out, you'd look up and they'd be free on the way back. They were well tuned in. So with that, I was wanting to sort of break up and sort of get around the lake and, you know, it's a new pond, you want to learn it all. Like I said, the next sort of 4 or 5 trips, well, it was on the next trip, sorry, the fish actually started to spawn. They were set up in there, early hours in the morning, real aggressive liners, you know, something's not right here. As soon as first light, seen a little group of them start. So I wound up the rods in, just got straight out in the boat and just sort of floated out amongst them, just trying to get eyes on a few. And I saw a few of the ones that people have been talking about, you know, none of the true monsters. It was certainly a group of the smaller fish. So I left them to it, come for a mooch round the pit, and right on the back, couldn't get any further away from them. Seen 4 or 5 fish, you know. One they call the Long Island fish, 40 pounder. The big scaly, although I wouldn't have got as good a glimpse of it as I'd liked, it was enough to know what I was looking at. It sort of drifted away. Another good mirror and a 30 pound common, you know, so there's 4 fish there, 2 of the big uns and 2 sort of good uns. They were 20 pounders, you know. These have come out the way, so that's where I set up. It's got some traps set. But yeah, no joy. Got up in the morning, I actually left and them spots were still untouched to then, and so the next 4 or 5 trips sort of followed suit of that really. Like I say, the weed was just starting to sort of take hold, come up around the pit. A few more series of spawning over the next week or 2, there were a little group of them there, or a little group of them in the night kick-off there. Yeah, so it's just sort of getting on the pit, baiting spots, learning spots. A lot of baiting areas, sort of ready for the coming summer. I can remember a couple of times, you know, real sort of frustrating fishing, where on this corner, sort of down to the right, I'd seen some fish showing. Moved on to them, fresh northeast wind, real warm day the day before, big pressure drop, temperature sort of crashed by 10 degrees. And they'd moved into the corner, I'd been throwing bait in there. When I say bait, you know, 20 boilies here, 20 boilies there, never enough to sort of cause attention of the birds. But no, they were there, the carp were there. Saw one show, wound them in, walked round, stood in the reeds of my chest waders, big plume of bubbles, another one, you're thinking, oh, we're on here. Packed all the gear up. As it sort of slowed down, although this was daytime action, which was quite rare for the pit, the conditions, you know, they screamed it. So everything was sorted, flicked them out in front. I knew the ground, a lot of looking from the boat, and there was literally a patch of weed, perhaps this sort of size, in the middle of a, you know, couple of sort of snooker-sized tables, just clear out in front. And, we've not wanting to make any disturbance, you know, they were already there. Simple balanced nuts, rigs were the same, just swapped the big leads for a little 2-ouncer, a little bag, flicked it out, bump, yep, repeat the process. I remember it going down a little bit softer, but thought, you know, it'll do. It's going to cut it more if I sort of wind it in and do it again. So with that, a couple of baits around them, and sat back. Inside, I was actually filming topography that day, so we sort of out behind the trees, doing a lot of that. Once he'd gone, come evening time, you know, you're back in your swim, you're sort of watching. God, they turned up, you know, this side of the trees, right onto me, liners. Going to, you know what I mean, I can remember getting my head down sort of 11, 12 o'clock thinking, why haven't I had a bite? Why haven't I had a bite? You sort of wander out amongst the reeds, still there. What's going on? I knew there wasn't any bait there apart from what I'd you know, 10 baits, and I'd clearly seen they'd gone. Woke up in the morning, you know, 4:30, still no bite, thinking what is going on, got in the front of the swim. And there's a couple of little kois in here, well, I say little, there's a few that sort of look, getting towards sort of 30-pound mark, but there's a koi in the corner that I'd seen from the boat, and yeah, he'd sort of rolled over on his side, but the other ones that were with him were not bad ones, so indicating that they were still there. Nothing. I thought 8 o'clock, and I thought, I can't take this anymore. I was going to switch the nuts just to 2 little pink pop-ups, swing them out, see if I can grab one's attention. But no, picked up the right-hander. No, the left, sorry. I've never sort of, say, picked it up and just sort of swung it in. I couldn't feel it coming out of the weed straight away, and I thought, the chances of it landing on that. And as I picked up the other one, it sort of come through the water all like this, and the swan muscle had closed over meal baits of anything that could happen. So yeah, a few sort of real chances where you almost should have had one. But yeah, 5 or 6 trips, no joy. Went away on holiday, had a week off, sort of the front of the house out, week away in Cornwall with the missus, and then it was back. As you can imagine, absolutely raring and chomping at the bit to get back. Routine of Burko was on, bucket of pigeon, bucket of tigers were cooked, 10 kilo boilies out, half chopped up, headed down. I remember arriving here sort of quite late on in the Sunday evening, you know, an hour or 2 of light left. You know, there's a couple of swims that I already had clips for, that back channel, and a swim, the roller. Very sort of close work, close enough to throw your baits to your spots. I'd done a lap and sort of thought, if I'm going to get fishing, it's going to be one of these. Like I said, the weed was well and truly coming up now. To be honest, I flipped a coin, and yeah, roller. Set up in the roller, got the rods out, bollock dropped. They had absolutely Gary. As soon as the rods were sorted, gone into the evening, if I'd sort of got the heads, not the tails, and gone in there, it would have been a very different sort of story. You know, you've been sat there all like that. What the case was, I sort of sat there all the evening thinking and hoping and praying a few push this way. And I did a few shows where this sort of pushed towards me. You were talking 20, sort of 30 yards away. I was sort of coming to the morning, up 4:30, boom, seen one short, so just at the back of me. And I was fishing, locked up, actually on braid at the time. I say 4.5, 5 wraps it is. I had them on 2 rod buzz bars out in front, single stick off there, single stick off there. Gone back to sort of a few hours kip, probably about 7 o'clock, woke up to a real vicious bite. Ran out, both sort of lights were on, and as I've sort of gone to pick up the rod, slipped, literally lay on my back in just sloppy, I wouldn't describe it as shit. Picked up the wrong rod, brought that one down, picked up the right rod, it's on, gone. And there's a big bit of concrete in front of that swim. Like I say, I'd locked everything up solid, but still managed to take a fair, you know, in a good rod length for 2 a line off the bite. It's kited right behind this piece of concrete and gone. Devastated, as you can imagine, you know. Sort of done them series of, you know, 5 sort of trips, come close, pants down a few times, had the bite gone. So yeah, it was off with the braid. In my head, the braid now was only for taking rods amongst sort of weed. If I was going to be fishing up to the snags, it was going to be the mono. I'd moved into the back channel with the amount of activity that I'd seen in the evening and in the morning. They were clearly there. I remember moving around there. Although I'd had that loss, I can remember sort of all the gear packed up there, watching them. There were still patches of bubbles coming up. One had still come over, they were there. Went for the mooch round, left them to it. I knew my spots, so sort of one off to the left, one off to the right, one in front. And 2 o'clock in the morning, tink, left-handers away. Now we're picking it up, fish is charged, but fishing that locked up, you know, it's turned relatively easily. A few gains on it, and then it's kited right towards the trees, again another surge. On that, I've heard it flip over. He wanted a big fish, you could tell. And yeah, on another surge, it sort of come away, and the up point sort of all bird over. So yeah, 2 losses on the bounce in as many nights, but you know, trying to take the positive out of it, I'd had a couple of bites. But on that, I mean, I had the routine of, I'd turn up on a Sunday, like I said, prep on my bait over the weekend, buckets of particles and hemp and so on, cook them all up. And I'd go for the routine of a few kilos of boilies all sort of ground up, crushed tigers, and I'd make up a bucket of mix, pellets and all. It'd be out in the boat, and I had a number of spots around the lake I'd be putting bait onto sort of regular, not in any masses, you know, 4 or 5 handfuls, just everywhere. And whilst this was going on, I'd seen a few fish milling about on the surface out in the open water in front of a swim called Long Island. The weed had really sort of took hold out in that area, you know, big open water area, fields of just weed. And I'd dropped, not like I say, not masses, 4 or 5 handfuls on these little spots the day before previous, gone and checked them, and 2 of the 4 had been cleared. The 2 were completely untouched. The 2 spots of bait had all gone, but amongst, in sort of between them, there was these 2 sort of murky holes, and you're talking, you know, big bucket lid sort of size. And do you know when you stand in the dirt and you, like your welly, you take your foot out, and then sort of 10 minutes later you get like that halo just hanging over the bottom? Well, they were over the spot, you know, clearly they'd been in there feeding. So they were H blocked up. The 2 spots that were missing the bait were H blocked up. Back to the swim, everything packed up. In there, rods on the spot, and all dropped by the boat, you know, back on with the braid, out there, 8-ounce grippers, all done, trap set. And sort of sat next to the rods in the evening, perhaps 8 o'clock in the evening, left hand, a big eruption on the surface. What on? Sort of coming in quite easily. Definitely a carp, a few surges, and it's literally chesties on, textbook, out with the net, hit the surface, gone right, pulled. You couldn't write it, you know, 3 in a row. I literally looked up and just thought, you're taking the piss. So with that, absolutely, you know, robbed back out on the spot. Managed to get it done just before dark. And I was on my last night, and we're waking up first light in the morning, and a load of weed has sort of broken up. Got the tips there, you know, it's all over the, rafts of it all over the braided line, sort of coming off the tips. And cleared it all. This is like 4:30 in the morning, cleared it all because it's forever, even the sensitivity on low. But with fishing so locked up, you know, you couldn't sacrifice your sensitivity, you had to have it on full up and just make the habit of clearing it all the time. So with that done, back to bed, woke up a few hours later, it was probably about 6:30 at this point, and watching. I had a single bleep on the left-hander, looked. I remember seeing this weed sort of, that again clicked it on the braid, and just sort of watched it. It shook me with that, the tip, what on? Ran down, yep, quite heavily weeded with that, say the braid, sort of 90 yards or so off to the left, steady pressure, you know, he's coming. On with the chesties, out with the net. I was thinking, God, please stay on, please stay on. Ball of weed around it, and I could sort of see it approaching there, it's a mirror, not a bad one. It's in the net, was in, took the rod back, and then we're ripping all the weeds sort of apart, thinking, it's not long island fish. Definitely. It's definitely him. Just flimmed him over and I thought, heavily spawned out, you know, but it was him for sure. And, took a quick picture of it in the net, secured it all up, and sent a few pictures, well, and then I sent a dad a picture. Definitely got the long island fish. It with a sling, and yeah, absolutely, you know, you couldn't have settled them losses any better with that one. Incredible old carp, you know, he was a 30-pounder before I was even born. From originally the like next door, sort of made his way into a real old special carp, you know, on the mat, you got all these scratches and dinks sort of imprinted into his head, obviously, in the sort of, you know, look at his own full of concrete and snags. Absolutely incredible old carp, and regardless of his weight, you know, huge buzz. He was 34 £10, you know, sort of low 40, autumn and spring, but like I say, regardless, mega buzz to catch him. You can imagine, drive home absolutely, you know, them losses had sort of gone, massive higher catching, one of the ones I really wanted, came too late to catch. And it was sort of on from then, and yeah, dropped straight back into that swim the following week, rods into the same area, had a nice 27 pounder, they'd gone quiet. Like I say, I was baiting spots all around the pond, and it was just a series of, I think from then, sort of straight the way through, you know, I never managed to not sort of come and get a bite. Some wicked carp, a lot of them, you know, 28, 29 pound long things, mega looking things. Remember one hot day, mooching round and see a few of them, you've got two ends to the pit almost, and it sort of bottlenecks, almost like a dog bone. I say shallow, it's stuffed full of weed, shallow ground, mooching through there. And some spots again, you know, you pass it in the boat, 3 or 4 handfuls of bait. All the spots I sort of prepped, all gone from the day before, and every spot had a carp within a rod length of the spot. You know, I can remember sort of in the inflatable, ever so gently, trying to sort of sneak a rig in there, backing up. Yeah, managed to catch 2 sort of that evening. Wicked long jet black 26. Again, a real jet black, real smooth leather male, you know, 29.2 I think he was, but ridiculous looking carp, you know, and don't half put an account for himself. I think it was getting on to sort of late July now. And I noticed from, I say, you're around the boat sort of most days you're fishing, more and more fish I was seeing in an area where you've got some pads and you've got a shallow swim and you've got a bar that sort of shoots off to your right with some trees that grow out on it to sort of stop your fishing there. And I set up in the shallow swim. You can see these carp, they were coming almost like right in front of the swim. You couldn't fish from there. You know, if you hook one, bang, rod length to the left, they're in hell. You're never going to, in a million years, going to land them. And quite, you know, quite weed-free, shallow ground there. So these pads, you know, they're probably talking a 50-yard stretch, 5 big series of pads, completely inaccessible. And every time you mooch through with a boat, you know, you'd be seeing 6, 7, 8, sometimes 10 carp in there, and that's really what you could see. So there was a lot of fish using that area. And with a bit of permission, I had permission to make a swim, sort of. I chose to make it sort of 30 yards up to the right of them. So if you imagine the shallow swim would be here, a series of pads, I've chose to make it here. And between not wanting to set right on top of these pads, you know, real sort of thick, been there for years. But between where I'd made the swim and the actual pads, there was, you know, a number of snag trees sort of, they've been there for years, sort of growing down over the margin, but your margins are quite deep there, 7 foot perhaps. You know, and the tree would be starting sort of 4 foot down and then growing out over the margin shelf, you know, hanging over there, a real problem if you used to hook one. So these had to come out. It was a day's work, you know. The only way to do it, rake, bit of rope out the van, dangle the rake down in the boat, sort of hook it all up, chuck the rope over the tree, back onto the bank, using the big branch of the lever and sort of pulling these trees up out the water, tie it off, grab them and then just pull them back and you were just snapping them on themselves. You know, some of them, but they've been in the water for so many years, you know, it's a lot easier than it actually sounded. Yeah, a bit of graft, these sort of 3 trees, sort of snags were sort of cleared from here, one to the right of swim, you know, danger free now. And with this in mind for a couple of weeks previous, I'd been chucking the odd handful, and literally the odd handful of pellet just next to these pads. And on the morning I decided to do it, I sort of crept through the pads, through the bushes, pads are just here, and I'm watching the bubbles come up, ones come over, and I thought this needs to be done. You know, that's, definitely get a few bites from this area. And it was my last night, so I'd spent all day clearing all that, waded down, rod in position, bit of bait round it, waded back up the margin. But yeah, midnight, I had a bite off the pads. Got him in without too much problem really. Bit of a tussle around there, but apart from their pads, you've only really got a snag here that's at the same sort of range, so as long as it didn't take much line and go right, it was all right. £20 common, I think £20 8 ounces, but you know, it was a start of something I knew might sort of progress. So before I left, you know, big helping of them, particles and pellets, probably 10 or 15 kilos, you know, quite a lot on the spot to look at it was. But as well, there was a couple of little scruffs, so I baited them out in front, wanting to have that rod and a couple of spots sorted for my other rods. And it was kind of a starting point. Every Sunday then I'd turn up, I'd bait my other spots around the lake. I'd always check that, and after a big hit of bait, you know, it'd be gone. And unlike most spots, it wasn't turning to gravel. The odd little speck and the odd little brick, you know, swan mussel and so on, but it was never polishing off, and I think that was, or turned out to be a very good thing. You keep fishing it, put a lot of bait on it, you'd always check it when you'd arrived on the Sunday, gone. But I can remember I'd had that common, and on leaving I'd seen a big common in there. Now, not one of the dumpy ones. There's a common we've got a picture of that Fairbrass had caught years ago at 37. Now I think it may be that one, quite a long fish. And to look at in the water, I had a real good look at him, you know, he's definitely 38 to 42 pound. And he was at the other end of the pads. When I had that common, give it a real big hit of bait, look to see it at the other end of the pads milling about, away for the weekend, come back on the Sunday, done what I'd done around the pit, worked my way back round to the pads. And as I'm sort of approaching the spot, you know, outboard up, real sort of gently. It's cruised from underneath the pads, but my spot's here, and these pads here, it's cruised, you know, so rather than it being 50 yards away, this fish has come from here. Definitely the same fish, with the same mirror as well, little orange, like white bleachings on this mirror's tail. Didn't even hesitate, you know, straight in there. This time I'd sort of out with a boat, lower the rig onto the spot, 4 or 5 handfuls of bait, for sort of the other rods out in front. I'd only been there, well, rod had been in a couple of hours. One of the other lads had sort of arrived, dropped in for a quick brew. I say rod only out a couple of hours, did. Sort of look, tips knocking, and the next thing, as I've sort of picked the rod up, powerhouse of a carp, you know, I picked it up, I couldn't, although locked up solid, you know, it's pulled it sort of straight, almost like you're pulling for a break, and just unstoppable. Turn off again, solid, you know, absolutely solid. It's gone through the pads, so took to the boat, pretty much thinking, you know, this is no good, this is not good. Got there, pulled my rig literally out the middle of the thickest of the pads, obviously leg gone, rig pretty much intact, just gone, no carp. With the disturbance of me ploughing through it, and obviously I took to the boat rapidly, forgetting my oars, and Mickey had chucked me a bloody oar, landed in the water next to me. I thought, you know what, I felt like packing up there and then and moving, but didn't. Got the rod back in just before it was dark, and yeah, sort of sat there livid thinking, that was a good one, that was a good one. But I was fishing braid, 55-pound braid, you know, size 2, 50-pound up, everything was bomb-proof. I remember having another bite in the morning, sort of woke up to it, up early, like, I mean, you have to sleep in your chest waders in that swim, because you have to be on that rod rapid. Yeah, 4 o'clock, bite onto it, mental tussle, got him in, different calibre to the thing that I'd lost the evening before. Common, 22-pound, bits of koi in it, mad, croaking its head off, fins all erect, real angry thing. A few self-takes of him, puts him back, got the rod back out, and perhaps just sat there completely unexpected. 9 o'clock, things busted off again. Again, I couldn't stop this fish. Through the pads, this time, on stopping it, I'd literally clamped down and thought, if I don't, it's gone anyway. Flat rodded, I've heard a big explosion down to my left, it's come back, half the hook sort of opened out, you know, something's got to give somewhere. So with that, you know, it was off completely. Again, I thought, no, cannot be using this braid. You cannot stop them, you know, so it was just pulled up with 25-pound 0.55, I think it is, it's ridiculously thick. But again, you know, they're coming out of features onto you, so I thought, regardless, low stretch, absolutely bomb-proof. And on switching to that, you know, I never lost a bite, fishing locked up with that. Because you'd lock up absolutely solid with the braid, and I mean solid, you can't twist anything anymore. They'd still bust off on that take, and as soon as the spool's got momentum and turning, it's like a car that's rolling down a hill, you know, it's the hard work's done. Whereas with the mono, it could never do that. You'd have the bite, and literally before you even got to the rod, you'd hear the thing flip over on the surface, acting like a pole almost, like with the elastication. So without a doubt, hard lesson learnt, but lesson learnt all the same. And had a number of nice fish from that area. No monsters, lovely, real long sort of orange belly to him, 30-pound 2-ounce mirror. Couple of, I think I had 2 or 3 mirrors, 27, 28-pound. But it seemed to, you know, I think I'd hooked 12 or 13 from that area over a course of perhaps a month. And that's not sort of spending my full time in that swim. Like I say, I'd kind of go in there on a Sunday, nick a bite, fish elsewhere, bait it, drip back in there, try and nick a bite, not wanting to overfish it and completely spook them out the area as such. I was heavily baiting Long Island area again. There's a spot, actually the same spot that I caught the Long Island fish from. I decided for a left one day, you know, conditions, I'd looked on the app. So yeah, saw an opportunity over there, and it was actually on my last night. I spent a couple of nights in the pads to no avail. Put quite a bit of bait on this area before I left, topped up on the Sunday. You know, big bucket of pellet, load on there. The birds smashing it every week you see them. But with loads of little small food items, just sure, that time of year, you know, one of them big ones will make use of it. And checked it one day, I could see the birds on it in the morning, and I put a lot on it the evening before, sort of checked it around 11 o'clock, sort of mooch time, nothing, gone. Absolutely everything gone. Weed at the side of the spot rolled over, fresh sort of black silt showing. Well, they've been in here. So yeah, I moved for my last night, got the rods in position. Yeah, it's never quite sort of a big west, sort of southwesterly pushing in, you know, real quite strong. And it was around 1:30 in the morning. Bit of a twitchy bite, a few beeps to sort of wake me up. On with the boots, sort of down to the rods, you know, no sort of immediate panic, because normally with a bite on that braid, you don't half know about it. But yeah, just a cluster of bleeps. I've gone down there. It's out the clip, bobbin's sort of tight, and you can just see the rod tip sort of knocking, bouncing a bit. In all honesty, I thought, tufties. Picked the rod up, wound down. Where's the carp? soon sort of, there's a lot of weed out there, although, you know, it's not deep water, you know, you're fishing 5 or 6 foot of water, and never really struggle to land them from the bank, for to be fair, in shallow weedy water, as long as you can keep that pressure on. And with the wind out there and other lines, you know, it'd be more of an headache sort of nipping out the boat to him, so don't get wrong, if they don't come and they're solid, no hesitation. But no, rod sort of steady pressure, it soon started to come, inch by inch. And where the chest is, out, not much, you know, he clearly got a bit of weed around his head. Pumped him in, I remember him sort of swirl there, on with the head torch, yep, off. As I sort of thought, big mass of weed around his head, just see a little tail poking out the back. As it sort of, mass sort of neared the net, on with the torch, in with it, just see like an orange tail sort of flop in the back of it, or orange sort of glimpses to it. First thing I thought, I got one of them little kois. And you know, couldn't see much of the fish. So on there, turned it over, and I was sort of clearing all the weed. You can see it there, plump as hell, fat, big angry thing. Just nicked in as well, look, just literally in and out, just unhooked him there, no mark at all, mouth absolutely pristine, white glowing thing. Yeah, secured the net, obviously the rod's done for the night now. Up against the bivvy, all the mat, got the sling out. I remember lifting him up thinking, oh Christ, he's a good one. And on with the mat, and always take a few pictures quickly on my phone. One if they escape, or just sort of when they're in the sling and that. Just sort of see if they've been caught before on the Facebook. Yeah, he's on the mat. There, fat, you know, real fat as hell. Everything zeroed up in the sling. 37.2. You know, not one that I sort of recognise. You know, he's not certainly one of the A team as such. He must have been one that come through the ranks. Well, turned out to be one that sort of pushed through the ranks. You know, last capture, I think 2 or 3 sort of Septembers previous at £26. And there he was, fat as hell at 37. So yeah, absolutely immaculate. You know, so you've seen all these pictures of all these myths, and this one caught once, like I say, and that one 2 captures 25 years, and you know, so you've got them are your primary sort of targets, but as well you've got fish like this that are coming through, not seen for a few years, and then bang, special mega carp from the mouth. You know, you can tell they're not getting hooked very often. Although, like I say, there's a few losses. Certainly, there's a lot that spend a hell of a lot of time behind that woodwork, and you know, you might get a couple of chances a year when they venture out. And if you're lucky enough to capitalise on that, you might get your hands on one of them special ones.